She never planned to see him again. There was no goodbye, no number exchanged, not even a name remembered clearly, just one night, one man, one moment that melted the weight of the world she carried. But when the pregnancy test turned positive, when the second line refused to fade, that forgotten night became the beginning of everything. Have you ever kept something to yourself because saying it out loud would make it too real? Ever carried a truth so heavy you learned to smile through the silence? Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories. This one isn't just about love or power or regret. It's about what happens when a man disappears after one night and shows up years later, staring into the eyes of a child that looks just like him. If you've ever loved in silence, if you've ever raised your head with strength when the world handed you chaos, stay with this story. Before we begin, tap like if you believe every woman carrying a loan deserves to be seen. Hit subscribe if you're ready for stories that heal and hold your heart, and drop a comment at the end because your voice matters here. Let's begin. Zariah Blair had learned to disappear in plain sight. In a room full of luxury suits and designer heels, she blended in like wallpaper, not because she wanted to, but because life had taught her that the less noise you make, the fewer problems you attract. She stood behind the coat check counter of the Skylight Grand Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, folding scarves, hanging trench coats, and waiting for the night to end. Her flats were soaked from the slushy sidewalk outside, and her feet were screaming. The annual Eastern Tech Gala buzzed behind the heavy ballroom doors. Billionaires, investors, tech founders, glasses clinking, deals being hinted at between sips of vintage, champagne, all of it miles away from her life, except for the coats she handled with care, hoping for tips that rarely came. A man's voice boomed down the corridor. "Where's Cullen?" "He's on in 10. Another answered. "He left already." Said he wasn't feeling it. Zariah didn't look up. She kept folding. Most of them never stayed the whole night anyway. Minutes passed. The hallway emptied. The music inside thinned. Her shift had another hour. Then came the sound of slow footsteps, not hurried like the others. Calm, steady. She looked up, and her breath caught. Cullen Easton stood just a few feet away. He wasn't what she expected. Sure, she'd seen his face on tech blogs and financial reports, but photos didn't capture the weight of his presence. He was tall, with dark hair that curled slightly near his temple. His jaw was sharp, eyes colder than ice, and still, there was something tired in them. He didn't hand her a ticket, didn't ask for his coat. He just stared at her for a moment. "You okay?" he asked, voice low but clear. Zariah blinked. "Sorry. You've been standing in the same spot since I walked out. You okay?" She let out a short laugh, trying to downplay the ache in her spine. "Feet are killing me, but that's part of the glamour, right?" He smiled, but it wasn't a big smile, just the kind that pulled at the corner of his mouth. "Want a chair?" She shook her head. "If I sit, I won't get up again." He nodded, then stepped closer. Still no coat in hand, no arrogance, just stillness. She tried not to stare at him too long, tried to ignore the tailored fit of his black suit, the way he leaned against the wall like he didn't owe the world anything. "You're not what I expected," she blurted. Cullen raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" "I don't know." Someone louder, more impressed with himself. He tilted his head slightly. "And what are you?" She blinked. "Sorry." "Are you impressed with yourself?" The question made her pause. She wasn't used to being asked about herself at all, especially not by someone like him. She shrugged. "I think I'm just trying to survive the night." Cullen studied her face. "Do you want to get some air?" Zariah hesitated. The ballroom was still in full swing. Her manager was likely walking around with his clipboard, checking time cards. "I have a shift." "I won't keep you long," he said. She looked around. The hallway was empty, quiet. She looked back at him, his calm stare, his stillness. "And against all reason," she said, 5 minutes. They walked through the back corridor and stepped out into the cold. She immediately regretted it, until he took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was warm. So was he, somehow, despite the distant look in his eyes. They didn't speak for a while, just walked past the service alley and around the corner where the streetlights flickered over melting snow. "Why'd you leave the gala?" she asked. Cullen shoved his hands into his pockets. "Didn't feel like performing tonight." "You were supposed to speak, right?" "Yeah, but speeches are for people who like the sound of their own voice." "And you don't?" "I like silence." Zariah glanced at him. "You're a mystery, Cullen Easton." He looked at her and smiled again, soft this time, almost sad. "What's your name?" "Zariah." "No last name?" She smirked. "You'll forget it by morning anyway." They walked some more, past a bakery that had closed an hour ago. She told him about her second job at the diner. He told her about loving code more than people. They ended up back at the hotel entrance. "I've got to clock out," she said. He hesitated. Then, "Come up with me." Her breath caught. "I'm not that kind of—" "I didn't mean—" He cut in, shaking his head. "No expectations. I just don't want this to end yet." Zariah looked at him, really looked. This wasn't a man trying to collect something. He wasn't drunk, wasn't slick. There was something broken in his eyes, something too familiar. She made a decision she'd never made before. "Okay." Zariah didn't know what she expected as the elevator climbed, but it wasn't this silence. Cullen stood beside her, quiet, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the small screen above the elevator door. No sly glances, no unnecessary comments, just stillness, the kind that made her wonder how often he found himself alone in rooms full of gold and felt nothing at all. When the elevator dinged, the doors opened into a private hallway lined with matte black walls and soft amber lighting. A single door at the end recognized his keycard. It clicked. He held the door open for her without a word. She stepped in slowly. The penthouse was clean, minimal, stark almost. No flashy art, no velvet curtains, just polished concrete floors, clean lines, and tall windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. Manhattan glowed outside, but inside it felt like a pause button had been pressed on the world. "You live here?" she asked. "Only when I can't sleep." She turned to him. "And how often is that?" He didn't answer. Zariah walked toward the window slowly, her fingers grazing a sleek leather couch. This is the kind of place that looks like it should echo. He stepped out of his shoes by the door, then loosened his tie. "It does." She turned back toward him. "So why bring me here?" He leaned against the kitchen island. "Because I liked talking to you, and because I didn't want to go back to being alone just yet." Zariah didn't respond, not right away. There was no music, no alcohol, no flirtation, just the low hum of the city behind glass and two people in their quiet. He offered her tea. She nodded. He made 2 cups, hands steady as if muscle memory had done this 1,000 times, but his face looked unfamiliar with company. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, cradling their mugs. "So," she said, "what does a billionaire do when he's not making money?" He chuckled. "Watches sunsets. Reads things I've already read before. Overthinks." She raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? I never said I was exciting. You're one of the youngest tech billionaires alive, and the only thing in your fridge is a lemon water and a half carton of almond milk." "Exactly." She laughed, fully this time. The sound filled the space, bounced off the cold walls, and wrapped around his chest in a way he wasn't ready for. He stared at her. She felt it. The room shifted. He set his cup down. So did she. Zariah didn't plan the kiss, but it happened, slowly, gently, like breathing in something you forgot you needed. His lips were warm, not forceful, curious, like he hadn't kissed anyone in years and wanted to do it right. When he touched her cheek, she didn't flinch. When he leaned closer, she didn't pull away. And when his forehead pressed against hers after that first kiss, both of them, breathing a little deeper, she whispered the one truth that rose to her lips. "I haven't felt this safe in a long time." His reply was quiet. "Neither have I." They didn't rush. There was no undressing frenzy. No cinematic passion, just touches, eyes that lingered, hands that asked before they took, breath that paused between moments. In the stillness of his cold, beautiful penthouse, Cullen Easton let someone see him, and Zariah Blair let someone hold her. When their bodies finally met beneath those clean white sheets, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like something whole. Morning arrived quietly. The sky over Manhattan turned a pale pink. Zariah stirred to the sound of silence. Not even the buzz of traffic made it past those windows. She blinked, reached across the bed. It was empty. His side wasn't even warm anymore. Her heart thudded. She sat up slowly, wrapped the blanket around her, and walked barefoot to the kitchen. No note, no jacket on the chair, no Cullen. She scanned the room again, checked the guest bathroom, looked out the hallway window. Nothing. He was gone. For a minute, she just stood there. And when she finally exhaled, she told herself it didn't mean anything, that maybe he had a meeting, maybe he'd return. But he didn't. By 7 a.m., she folded the blanket, tied her hair up, and slipped back into her coat check uniform. She left the keycard on the kitchen counter, though no one had asked her to. Back at the hotel lobby, she clocked in early. No one asked where she'd been. And she didn't offer it. That night had been tender, real, but she reminded herself it didn't come with promises. It didn't need to, because in her world, beautiful things were borrowed, not kept. Zariah didn't expect a fairy tale. She'd never been the kind of girl who waited by the phone, hoping for a prince. So when she returned to her apartment after that night in the penthouse, she didn't stare at the door or pace near the window. She didn't scroll through search engines trying to find out if Cullen Easton had mentioned her in an interview or showed up at the hotel again. She got up the next morning, tied her apron on, and clocked into the 7 a.m. breakfast shift at Clover's Diner like she always did. The uniform smelled like coffee and bleach. Her sneakers had a hole in the sole, and the register jammed every time someone paid cash. She was home. Her mother's prescriptions were due again, so the tips she made were folded, neatly and tucked inside an envelope behind the sugar canisters. No splurging, no lingering in the clouds. By the time Thursday rolled around, she had convinced herself it had meant more to her than it had to him, and that was okay. She wasn't angry, just realigned. But realignment didn't explain the wave of dizziness that hit her out of nowhere while she was pouring a refill for table 4. She caught herself on the booth edge, smiled politely, and waved off the concerned look from the older woman sipping tea. "Just a little tired, ma'am. I'm good." She wasn't. Later that night, she burned the grilled cheese she was making at home. The smell didn't just bother her, it turned her stomach. She gagged over the sink. Zariah blamed stress. She blamed long shifts. She blamed the freezing weather and the lack of decent heat in her tiny apartment. Until she missed her second cycle. Even then, she didn't panic. She waited another week, bought 3 different brands of test kits from a 24-hour pharmacy on 10th Street and took them back to back in her bathroom. She sat on the floor while they processed. The peeling tile was cold beneath her. Her heart didn't race. She already knew. When the second pink line showed up on all 3 tests, she didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't move. She just stared at them in silence. For the first time in a long time, time didn't rush her. She just sat. The free clinic on 36th Street confirmed it. She was 9 weeks in, healthy, heartbeat strong. Her blood pressure was stable, iron slightly low. They handed her a folder of resources and a small bag with prenatal vitamins and flyers for Medicaid. "Do you have support?" the nurse asked gently. Zariah nodded once. Yes, it wasn't true, but she wasn't about to fall apart in that office. She stepped back out into the cold, folder clutched to her chest, her coat barely warm enough. The city moved around her, horns, chatter, wheels on pavement, but everything sounded distant. She thought of her mother, asleep in the next room of their apartment, unaware. She thought of her job, the rent, the hospital bills already unpaid. And she thought of him. Cullen, not his wealth, not the penthouse, not the way he kissed her like she mattered. She thought of the quiet way he disappeared, of the way his absence didn't leave a hole in her schedule, but a hollow in her chest. She didn't know how to reach him, didn't even try. She wasn't the kind of woman who chased men. She had no last name for him, no direct contact. Only one truth, that her child would come into this world already halfway connected to a man who didn't even know he existed. Back at home, she washed her hands in the sink and avoided the mirror. She put the vitamins on the kitchen counter. Then she sat at the table and opened her journal. It had been weeks since she last wrote in it. But tonight, she picked up the pen and wrote just one line. "Your father has no idea who you are, but I promise, I do." Zariah didn't tell anyone for weeks. Not her CO workers, not her boss at the diner, not even her mother. She carried the truth alone, one day at a time, one shift at a time. The morning sickness came hard and early. She adjusted by waking an hour earlier so she could throw up, rinse her mouth, force down toast, and make it to work with a composed face. She kept gum in her apron pocket, saltines in her purse, ginger tea in an old to-go cup she refilled 3 times a day. Cullen's name never left her lips. But in her mind, he stayed, not in a fairy tale way. Not in some delusion where he'd magically show up one day, fall to his knees and promise the world. No. She thought of him because there were little things she couldn't forget. The way his hands trembled just slightly when he made her tea. The way he listened with full silence, never interrupting, never shifting focus. The way his voice lowered, soft and vulnerable, when he said, "Neither have I." It wasn't love, but it was something. Now, it lived in her womb. She rubbed her belly in the mirror one night after her shift. It was barely there, a slight curve that could have been bloating or too much rice. But she knew. There was someone in there, growing, real, and they had his eyes, even if she'd never seen them yet. Zariah worked harder than ever. She picked up extra shifts at Clover's diner, started transcribing court audio at night from her laptop, sitting cross-legged in bed, headphones on, typing case numbers while her mother slept in the other room. She cancelled her phone upgrade, stopped buying lattes on Fridays, learned to shop for bulk rice and lentils. Her closet shrunk as her belly grew. Still, she never complained. What was there to complain about? This child was hers, not by accident, not by tragedy, by choice. She didn't need a father to validate the life forming inside her. But some nights, when she laid awake after 12 hours on her feet, ankles swollen, back aching, she stared at the ceiling and whispered into the dark, "Do you even know what you left behind?" At the 5-month mark, her bump started to show. The manager at the hotel noticed first. "You good?" he asked, eyeing her sideways during break. "Fine," she replied. "You know I can't have you lifting guests' bags once you're further along. I'll figure it out." He paused, then offered something unexpected. "My cousin owns a call center. Remote work. Medical surveys. It's not glamorous, but it's off your feet. Pays weekly." She blinked. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "You're one of the good ones. Thought you might need a plan B." Zariah swallowed hard. "Thank you." He shrugged. "Don't get soft on me now." By the 6th month, she stopped wearing fitted uniforms. She bought 2 long, stretchy dresses from a thrift shop and layered them with oversized cardigans. The city got colder. Her body got heavier. Her mother started to ask questions. "Are you gaining weight, baby? You all right?" Zariah smiled. "I'm okay, Mama. Just life catching up with me." She planned to tell her eventually. She just didn't know how to do it without setting off the alarms in her mother's anxious heart. Her mother had raised her alone too, and life had not been kind. The only person who knew the full story was the notebook. Every few nights, Zariah wrote letters, not to Cullen, to the child. "I felt you move today. It was like a tiny fish flipping inside me. I bought you socks. They're grey. You'll probably lose them, but I'll still fold them. Some days I'm scared. Some days I feel powerful. I think you've already changed me. The letters became therapy, a way to process the shift from Zariah, the invisible coat-check girl, to Zariah, the woman who would soon carry another heartbeat on her hip. Then came the false contractions. They woke her at 2 a.m. She groaned, curled to the side, gripped the bed frame, and breathed slowly. She didn't go to the hospital. She couldn't afford the cab ride. She waited. And when they passed, she sat up with tears dried on her cheeks, whispered, "We're okay," and rubbed her belly until sleep returned. By month 7, she was exhausted, bone-deep tired. She moved slower, breathed heavier, climbed steps like they were mountains. But she still made it. Every shift, every night, every appointment at the free clinic. And when they showed her the ultrasound at 32 weeks, she stared at the tiny face and whispered, "Hi, baby. I'm Zariah. I'm your mama. And we're going to be okay." Have you ever kept going, even when no one was watching? Even when your body was tired and the world didn't give you a break? Zariah didn't have support. She didn't have a name to call or a hand to hold. But she showed up every day for the life growing inside her. If this part of her journey moved you, tap like to show your support for every woman doing it alone. Drop a comment if you've ever had to be strong in silence. Hit subscribe if you're here for stories that reflect real strength, because the next chapter brings the kind of moment no one prepares for. Stay with us. Zariah had been feeling off all day. Not just the usual heaviness. This was different. Her back throbbed. Her stomach tightened in sharp pulses that didn't quite feel like the practice contractions her nurse had described. But she brushed it off. She had a shift at the diner and tips to collect. Her mother's medication copay was due tomorrow, and the electric bill had already come with a red sticker. So she tied her apron, rubbed her lower back, and forced a smile as she poured coffee for the early dinner crowd. By 6 p.m., she was limping. By 6:15, she was gripping the counter behind the register and biting down on her lip as the pain rolled through her again. "Zariah," her manager said, coming from the kitchen, "you're white as paper. Sit down." Now, she didn't argue. They sat her in a booth with a glass of water. Her apron was damp with sweat. She tried to focus on her breathing, the way the nurse had shown her. In through the nose, out through the mouth. In, out. "Want me to call someone?" her manager asked. She shook her head. "I'm fine. It's probably just Braxton Hicks." Another wave hit her. Stronger. She curled to the side and let out a breath that sounded more like a whimper. "I'm calling an ambulance," he said, already pulling out his phone. Zariah didn't protest. She was scared. At the hospital, the lights blurred. Voices melted into one another. The nurse's voice was calm but firm, blood pressures rising. "She's 34 weeks. Baby's in distress. Get OB on call." They were moving fast. Too fast. Zariah could barely think. The next thing she knew, she was being wheeled down a hallway with her gown open in the back and her hands trembling at her sides. She reached out and grabbed the nurse's sleeve. I'm alone," she whispered. The nurse squeezed her hand. "We're here now, sweetheart. You're not alone anymore." But it didn't feel that way. The room was cold, too bright. They strapped the monitor to her belly. The doctor explained everything, but she couldn't hold on to the words. All she knew was, "Emergency C-section. Baby's heartbeat dropping. We have to move now." Tears leaked from her eyes as they covered her face with the oxygen mask. The anesthesiologist said, "You'll feel pressure but no pain." But the pain was already there, deep in her chest, deeper than any incision. She turned her head and whispered one name inside her mind, not because she expected him to come, not because she forgave the silence, but because his absence was louder than the machines. Cullen. The baby came at 11:13 p.m. He was small, silent for a moment. Then, just as the panic started to rise, a cry, high-pitched, fragile. But there, Zariah didn't see him at first. The nurses rushed him across the room to a team in scrubs. Someone shouted stats. Another nurse adjusted her fourth. When they finally brought him to her, wrapped tightly in blue, she saw his nose. Her heart cracked open. He had his nose. Cullen's. She touched his cheek with her fingertip. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "I'm your mama. And you are stronger than both of us." She named him Lennox. Lennox Blair. The NICU became her entire world. For 3 weeks, Zariah was a ghost outside the hospital and a lion inside it. She brought her laptop and did transcriptions while Lennox slept, read books aloud beside his incubator, sang low lullabies, sat for hours, holding his tiny hand through the side slot in the glass box. She memorized every beep on the monitor, knew which nurse was strict and which one whispered to the babies when no one was looking. She fell in love, completely, without reserve. This child, this little boy who had almost arrived too early, had given her a new center. It didn't matter that his father didn't know. It didn't matter that she had no diamond ring or perfect nursery. What mattered was that he lived, that she had him. One night, after her mother had come and gone, after Lennox had been bathed and fed, Zariah left the NICU to grab a snack. She took the side hallway near the cardiac wing. It was quieter there, less chaotic. As she passed a frosted glass door, her eyes caught something. Eastern Tech Foundation Pediatric Grant Wing. She stopped. Her body went cold. That name. She stepped closer. Through the window, she could see a small group of doctors reviewing a chart. A woman sat beside one of the beds. Silver hair pulled tight, straight posture, expensive scarf wrapped over her shoulders. Zariah's heart thumped. She couldn't see her clearly, but the woman's profile, the eyes, the chin, it was too familiar. Her stomach turned. She was looking at someone connected to Cullen. She knew it. Her body knew it, before her brain even caught up. She stood frozen for several seconds, then backed away. Fast, she walked down the hallway, tossed the unopened snack into the trash, and left the hospital through the side exit without a word. She didn't sleep that night. 3 weeks after his early arrival, Lennox was cleared for discharge. Zariah dressed him slowly in a soft grey onesie that had tiny stars on the sleeves. He was still so small, but stronger now, eyes more alert, cries louder. He latched better, slept longer. She had learned to hold him like glass, but now she held him like gold. When they left the NICU, a nurse handed her a baby bag with formula samples and a folder full of first-year resources. "Any dad we should call for pickup?" she asked kindly. Zariah shook her head. "No, it's just us." The nurse smiled. "Well, you're doing amazing." Zariah returned the smile, but her throat tightened. Amazing didn't feel like the right word. She felt exhausted, uneven, grateful and overwhelmed all at once. Still, she carried Lennox out the front entrance, like royalty, his tiny hat slipping. To one side, her coat open so she could feel his warmth against her chest. Back at home, her mother cried. "Oh, look at him," she whispered, touching his fingers with a trembling hand. "Zariah, you didn't tell me he'd be this beautiful." Zariah smiled faintly. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared." Her mother nodded, then kissed her forehead. "You're not alone anymore, baby. He's got you. And you've got me." The next few weeks passed in a haze. Feedings every 3 hours, diaper changes like clockwork, half sleeps between cries. Zariah functioned like a machine, worn but moving. She kept a notebook near the crib to track feeding times, weight, breathing notes. She started working again remotely. Transcriptions mostly. Sometimes call center surveys while Lennox napped. The money wasn't great, but it covered diapers and her portion of the rent. The walls of their small apartment felt tighter now, but they also felt warmer, fuller, more alive. One Saturday, needing fresh air and something sweet, Zariah bundled, Lennox in a sling, and walked downtown to a second-hand bookstore. It had big windows, soft jazz music, and a coffee counter that sold her favorite lemon scones. She browsed the parenting section, humming gently as Lennox stirred against her chest. She reached for a title, The Mindful Mother, and when she turned, he was there. Cullen. standing in the aisle just 4 feet away, a book in his hand, a confused, familiar look in his eyes. Time froze. He blinked once, then again. Zariah. She didn't speak. Her hand tightened slightly around Lennox's back. The baby stirred, but stayed quiet. Cullen stepped closer, slowly, as if afraid a single movement might make her vanish. I didn't expect to see you here," he said softly. She said nothing. His eyes dropped to the sling, to the bundle against her chest. His entire body went still. The color drained from his face. "Is he—" Zariah didn't answer. She didn't have to, because Lennox moved. A tiny sound escaped his lips. His eyes opened for a moment, wide and piercing blue. Cullen saw it, and something behind his eyes shattered. Outside, they sat on a bench in the small park adjacent to the bookstore. Lennox slept again, curled safely between them. Neither spoke at first. Then Zariah broke the silence. "I never expected you to find out like this." Cullen swallowed. "I tried to find you." She turned toward him. "I didn't know your last name," he said. "You disappeared. No number, no trace. I even called the hotel, but they said you quit. I did. Why didn't you reach out?" She blinked hard. "Because I thought if it mattered to you, you would have found me." Her voice was quiet but steady. "Because I wasn't going to beg a man I barely knew to show up for something he walked away from." He didn't defend himself, didn't interrupt, just listened. Zariah pulled the blanket gently over Lennox's cheek. "His name is Lennox." Cullen breathed out slowly. "He's perfect." "I know." He sat back, staring at the baby. Then, with a voice so low she almost missed it, he asked, "Can I hold him?" Zariah hesitated. She looked down at Lennox, his small body rising and falling in steady rhythm. Then, without a word, she lifted him gently and handed him over. Cullen took him with both hands, clumsily but careful. The baby curled into his chest instinctively, warm and trusting. Cullen stared at him for a long time. "I missed everything," he murmured. Zariah nodded. "You weren't there." His jaw clenched. "You're right." A long silence followed. But this one wasn't bitter. It was broken and beginning. Cullen didn't call the next day. He showed up. Zariah had just finished her morning feeding with Lennox, who had begun sleeping in. 2-hour stretches, an improvement she celebrated in whispers and silent prayers. There was a knock on the door. Her heart leapt, then slowed. She checked the peephole. Cullen stood there, holding a baby carrier in one hand and a brown paper bag in the other. No flowers, no speeches. Just eyes that looked like he hadn't slept either. When she opened the door, she didn't say anything. He held out the bag. "Breakfast. From the spot near 10th and Wren. You mentioned their scones once." She looked at the label. Lemon blueberry. The kind she hadn't tasted since before Lennox was born. She opened the door wider. They sat across from each other in the kitchen. Lennox dozed in the carrier by the window, light wrapping softly around his face. Cullen poured the tea himself. No sugar, just like she liked it. Zariah kept her arms crossed. "I'm not here to disrupt anything," he said after a few minutes. "I'm not asking for access or forgiveness. I'm here to be here." She looked at him carefully. "Why now?" "Because I didn't know how to come back, and when I saw you at that bookstore, when I saw him, I realized I was already too late to do it right. But I'm still here trying." Zariah didn't soften, but she didn't push him out either. The visits started slow, once a week, then twice. He brought small things. A swaddle set, diaper cream, a copy of Goodnight Moon with Lennox's name written in the front cover, in neat blocky handwriting. He never stayed too long, and he never asked for anything. Zariah observed him the way a mother watches a stranger near her child, calm but cautious. She saw how his hands trembled slightly the first time he changed a diaper, how he read Pat the Bunny out loud with surprising softness, how he asked questions, listened, never tried to lead. One afternoon, when Lennox was crying from colic and nothing helped. Cullen rocked him in his arms for 45 straight minutes. Didn't complain, didn't give up, just whispered, "You're safe now, little man. I've got you." Zariah sat in the corner, holding her cup, watching. Something in her chest shifted, but not enough to name it. Cullen didn't talk about the penthouse, or money, or his world. He asked about hers, about the transcripts she worked on, about how her mother was doing, about the NICU days. Zariah kept most answers short, but he didn't push. She noticed the way he memorized feeding times, how he now knew to warm the bottle to the exact degree Lennox preferred, and she noticed that when Cullen was around, she didn't feel as tense, not because she trusted him, but because for the first time since her body split open to bring life into the world, someone was sharing the weight. One rainy evening, the power flickered. Zariah lit candles while Cullen held Lennox in his arms and gently hummed what sounded like a jazz standard. The baby settled faster than usual. Zariah watched from the kitchen. "You sing," she said. He turned his head slightly. "I used to." "Where'd you learn that one?" "My mother played it when my father was dying. It was the only thing that calmed her." Zariah didn't speak, but she noted it. A man who didn't use words to impress, but let them carry truth when they came. That night, after Cullen left, she stood at the door for a while, staring at the hallway he'd walked down. Her heart was caught between memory and motion. She didn't owe him anything. And yet, he was giving without asking. Slowly, quietly, consistently. The next Thursday, Cullen didn't come in the morning. He texted, "Is it okay if I stop by later in the afternoon? I found something Lennox might like." Zariah stared at the message. Short, unassuming, no emojis, no assumptions. She replied simply, "Okay." By 4 p.m., Lennox was fed and napping. Zariah had showered, and the apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon from the tea she was reheating on the stove. When Cullen knocked, he came with two things: a small, square package wrapped in brown paper, and a quiet look in his eyes, like he wasn't sure if he should be there, but came anyway. Zariah opened the door without a word. He walked in, nodded at her mother, who offered a kind but cautious glance from the couch, then placed the package gently on the table. "This is not a gift," he said. "More like a gesture." Zariah raised an eyebrow. He unfolded the paper. Inside was a framed print of a vintage map, Harlem, 1982nd edition. Zariah blinked. "Where did you find that?" "Online," he said. "You mentioned once that your mother raised you in a brownstone near 135th and Lenox. That's where I started looking." Zariah stepped closer. Her eyes scanned the streets. It was all there. Malcolm X Boulevard, the little corner cafe that used to be a bakery, the park that no longer existed. She touched the glass. "That's my whole childhood on one piece of paper." Cullen didn't speak. He just watched her. "I didn't think you remembered what I said that night," she whispered. "I remembered everything," he said, voice low, "especially the way you looked when you said you felt invisible." Zariah's eyes didn't lift, but her hand paused on the edge of the frame. Something in her softened. That evening, they sat on the floor beside Lennox's playmat. The baby was awake and alert, hands swatting gently at the dangling toys above him. Cullen made him giggle by bobbing his head and humming softly. Zariah watched, arms crossed, but the edges of her lips curved despite herself. "He likes you," she said. "I'm still learning," he replied. "He's not easy to please." "Neither are you." She raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to scare you?" "No. That's why I keep showing up." For a moment, she looked at him. Really looked. Cullen's hair was slightly disheveled. There was a stain on his sleeve from the bottle earlier. He hadn't worn a watch in weeks. No suit. No assistant. Just him. Trying. Later, as she washed dishes in the sink, he stood behind her and spoke softly. "You know I never forgot that night." She didn't turn around. "I didn't leave because I didn't care. I left because I didn't know how to stay." Zariah turned off the faucet, slowly dried her hands, then finally faced him. I don't need you to say the right things, Cullen. I need you to prove them. I'm trying to. Then don't stop. She walked past him, not waiting for a reply. But Cullen didn't stop. 3 days later, when Zariah woke at 6 a.m., there was a bag of groceries by the door. No note, no knock. Inside were formula cans, a new pacifier, almond milk, her favorite cereal, and diapers. She didn't call him, but she smiled. The knock came earlier than usual. It was Saturday morning. Rain tapped against the apartment windows, the sky still grey, not yet fully awake. Zariah stood at the stove, flipping pancakes one-handed while bouncing Lennox with the other. She didn't need to check the peephole. It was him. She pulled the door open, arching a brow as Cullen stood holding a small umbrella, a folded baby bouncer box under one arm and a coffee carrier with 2 cups dangling from his fingers. "You're early," she said. "You sound surprised." "I am." He offered a slow smile. "You told me once I was always late. Was that supposed to be romantic?" "Not even close," he replied, brushing water from his sleeves. "Just consistent." She stepped back to let him in. "Put that box by the playmat." Cullen obeyed without asking questions. He was getting better at that. They sat quietly for a while. Zariah sipped her coffee, black like always. Cullen fed Lennox his morning bottle while humming some unrecognizable melody under his breath. Zariah watched from the kitchen. There was a calmness about Cullen lately, less like a man trying to fix something, more like someone willing to be part of the process. Lennox clearly approved. He smiled faster around Cullen now, reached for him more often, and last week, during a particularly rough teething episode, only calmed. When Cullen walked the hallway with him tucked under his arm, Zariah noticed. She didn't comment, but she noticed. Later that day, after Lennox fell asleep in his new bouncer, Zariah did something she hadn't done in months. She invited Cullen to stay. "Take off your shoes," she said, settling into the couch. "You're not just visiting today. You're parenting." He blinked once, surprised maybe, but didn't make a scene. Just toed off his sneakers and sank into the cushion beside her. Zariah leaned her head back, closed her eyes. "You tired?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Always." There was a pause. "Want to talk or want quiet?" She opened one eye. "Talk." It started simple. She told him about the night her mother first collapsed in their kitchen, about how the ambulance took too long, how Medicaid fought every approval for treatment, how she'd started working 2 jobs at 19 and hadn't stopped since. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix. When she paused, he didn't rush to fill the silence. Just waited. She looked at him then, really looked. Cullen's hands rested on his knees. His eyes were soft, listening. No pity, no performance, just presence. So she kept going. She told him about the first boy she ever loved, a boy who promised the world and left the second things got hard. How she'd sworn to never need anyone again after that. How she kept her head down at the hotel, not because she was shy, but because the world had taught her that women like her didn't get second chances. They worked, they endured, and, if they were lucky, they stayed quiet enough to survive. "I didn't need saving," she said, her voice flat. "I needed rest. That night with you, it wasn't about fairy tales, it was about breathing." Cullen nodded slowly. "You let me see something that night. I didn't know how to handle it. So I ran. You disappeared." "I know." Zariah turned toward him, folding one leg beneath her. "You left me in a penthouse full of windows, Cullen. I woke up to silence and no number. You vanished. I was scared. You're a billionaire." He smiled faintly. "Money doesn't cure fear." She tilted her head, studying him. "Then why did you come back?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Because when I saw you in that bookstore, holding him, I realized you weren't the one who disappeared. I was—" The room quieted. The only sound was the faint rattle of wind against the window panes and Lennox's breathing from across the room. Zariah leaned back again, her voice quieter now. "I used to think love was supposed to come easy, that it would show up, solve everything, and stay. But now, I think love is just someone showing up after you've run out of words to ask. Cullen didn't respond right away. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand. Not with force. Not with a grab. Just offered it. She looked down at his fingers, then slipped hers into them. The moment didn't need a label, didn't need promises. But it was real. And it was the first time in months that Zariah didn't feel like the only adult in the room holding the weight of the world. Later, after dinner, instant pasta and oversteamed broccoli, Cullen washed the dishes without being asked. Zariah changed Lennox, hummed him to sleep, and then returned to the living room to find the kitchen spotless, the lights dimmed, and Cullen drying his hands with a clean towel. She leaned against the doorframe. Didn't take you for the wash and dry type. I'm the don't let her carry everything alone type. Zariah stared at him a moment, then nodded. That night, Cullen didn't kiss her. Didn't try to. He said goodnight at the door, rested one hand on her shoulder for a second too long, then left with quiet footsteps and a tired smile. Zariah closed the door gently behind him. Her fingers brushed over the place his hand had touched, and for the first time since the night he vanished, she whispered softly, "Maybe." Sunday morning started with sunlight, gentle and golden, streaming through the window blinds. Lennox cooed softly from his crib. Zariah stirred, stretched, and exhaled slowly before her feet touched the floor. She expected a quiet day. Laundry, bottles sterilizing, meal prepping. The usual rhythm. But at 8:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. "Cullen, would you and Lennox want to come with me today? Nothing fancy. Just a walk and a stop. No pressure." Zariah stared at the screen, then looked over at Lennox, who was now squirming and babbling with his feet in the air. She typed back, "Zariah, where to?" "Cullen, Riverside Park. There's a spot I go when I need to think. After, I want to take you to a bookstore I help sponsor. It's not public-facing, small, private, safe." She didn't respond right away. She got up, fed Lennox, changed his clothes, made coffee, and waited to see if the idea still made sense once the caffeine hit. It did. At 10 a.m., they met on the corner outside her apartment. Cullen had parked 2 blocks away in a discreet black SUV. No driver, no flashy moves. When he opened the door for her, he smiled but didn't touch her hand. He was careful now, thoughtful. The car seat was already installed in the back. Properly, Zariah noticed. The ride to Riverside was calm, music low, conversation lighter than usual. He asked about Lennox's sleeping patterns, what pediatrician she chose, what lullabies worked best. He didn't ask deep questions. He didn't make promises. He just stayed present. Riverside Park was quiet that morning. Cool breeze. Leaves beginning to change. The city hummed faintly in the distance, but here, on the edge of the Hudson, it was peaceful. Zariah wore a long burgundy coat and soft sneakers. Lennox was tucked snug in his baby carrier against her chest. Cullen walked beside them, hands in his coat pockets, head slightly bowed toward the ground. They walked for 20 minutes before they reached the spot he'd mentioned. It was a stone bench tucked beneath a wide old tree. The kind of place someone would sit to write a letter they never send. "This is it," he said. She glanced at him. "You come here often?" "I used to. Before things got loud." Zariah adjusted Lennox slightly and sat. Cullen stayed standing for a moment, then slowly lowered beside her. "It's not about the skyline," he said quietly. "It's about how far you can be from it and still feel the pull." Zariah said nothing, but she understood exactly what he meant. After the park, Cullen drove them to a quiet block tucked between 2 construction zones near the West End. From the outside, the building looked ordinary. Bricks, glass, clean lines. But inside, it opened into a warm, hidden bookstore. No signs, no branding, just shelves and soft music. Zariah blinked in surprise. "You weren't kidding." "I fund the space," Cullen said, "for a few non-profits that serve young readers and single-parent literacy programs. It's not public. But I come here when I need to feel normal. Zariah stepped inside. The air smelled like cedar and paper. Lennox slept on her chest. Cullen handed her a tea from the small counter, already waiting. The man behind the counter nodded, but said nothing else. Clearly, discretion was built into the walls here. They walked slowly between shelves. Children's books, memoirs, poetry. Zariah paused in front of a shelf labeled Voices from Home. She pulled a slim volume with a cracked spine. "My mother used to read this to me," she said. Cullen leaned closer. "Read it now." She looked at him. "Please." So she did. Right there in the middle of a secret bookstore, Zariah Blair read The People Could Fly out loud, soft and slow. Cullen listened with his eyes closed. When she finished, he said, "You sound like home." They didn't talk about what it meant. Not in the car. Not on the walk back. Not even when he carried Lennox's diaper bag upstairs while she settled the baby into his crib. But when Cullen turned to leave, Zariah did something she hadn't done since the night everything began. She opened the door, then stood still, and said, "You want to stay for dinner?" He looked surprised. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I don't invite people I'm not sure about." They ate spaghetti on the couch with Lennox propped in a rocker in front of them, watching with wide eyes like he was part of the conversation. They didn't talk about business or the past. They talked about food, about childhood cartoons, about their worst haircuts. When dinner ended, Zariah stood, walked into the kitchen, and rinsed the dishes. Cullen joined her, no words needed. And when she handed him a towel to dry, their hands brushed. He didn't reach for her, but she didn't move away. That night, after he left, Zariah stood by the window. Lennox asleep. Lights dimmed. And for the first time, she whispered to herself, "He's not just visiting anymore." Zariah never said it out loud, but she had rules for herself. Rule 1. Don't confuse presence with permanence. Rule 2. Just because someone shows up doesn't mean they'll stay. Rule 3. Love is only real when it stays after the noise starts. Cullen had been showing up for 8 weeks. Every Tuesday and Friday, without fail, sometimes more. No press. No interruptions. No red carpets. No. "Do you know who I am?" Energy. Just Cullen, in his dark coat, with a baby rattle or a tea bag or another book for Lennox. Zariah had started cooking on the days he came. Simple meals, soups, stews, sometimes pancakes for dinner, because that's all she had the energy for. She didn't say it was for him, but she made sure there was always enough. Cullen never pushed, never brought up the night they first met, never tried to redefine what they were. He just existed beside her, day after day, until her walls weren't so high anymore. One night, after Lennox had fallen asleep and her mother had turned in early, Zariah and Cullen sat on the couch. A movie played quietly in the background, but neither of them watched it. Cullen shifted slightly, his shoulder brushing hers. Zariah didn't move. "I've been thinking about something," he said. She glanced at him. "Should I be worried?" He smiled. "Probably." She waited. "I want to be more involved, not just on the outside. I want to be part of his day-to-day. Diaper runs, pediatric visits, grocery lists." Zariah stared at him. "I'm not trying to control anything," he continued. "You've built this world around Lennox that's beautiful. I just want a seat at the table." She looked away. "Zariah, I heard you." Silence. Then she whispered, "Do you know what it costs to trust someone with everything?" He turned toward her. "Tell me." "My mother trusted one man. He left, my father. He was good at first. Then he wasn't." "I'm not him." "I know, but I didn't think he'd be like that either, and I believed him." Cullen's voice dropped. "Do you believe me?" "I want to." He didn't push, didn't lean closer, just said, "That's enough for now." And it was. But things started to shift, not between them, but around them. It started small. A couple of women at the grocery store whispering as Cullen helped carry bags to the car. A diner customer who snapped a photo from across the room while he bounced Lennox. Zariah noticed. He noticed too. but neither brought it up until someone knocked on her door on a Thursday morning, holding a tablet with a headline on the screen. Billionaire tech mogul Cullen Easton spotted in Harlem with woman and baby, new flame or family. The woman at the door was polite, dressed casually, voice calm. "Ms. Blair, I'm not with a tabloid. I'm with a business publication. We're just following up on rumors." "No comment? No problem." Zariah didn't even respond. She closed the door without a word. Her hands shook as she texted Cullen. "Zariah, they know. Some outlet came to my door this morning." Cullen instantly, "I'm on my way. Don't answer anything. Keep Lennox inside." He arrived in under 20 minutes. No car, no security, no press. Just him. Hair messy, coat half-buttoned, breath a little rushed. "Are you okay?" he asked the moment she opened the door. "I'm fine," she said, stepping aside. "But I don't like this." "I don't either. I don't want my son's face in some clickbait headline." "Cullen, you have every right to feel that way." He sat down heavily on the couch, hands in his hair. "I've tried to keep this private, to keep you protected. I thought laying low would buy us time." Zariah folded her arms. "You mean keep me hidden?" "No," he said firmly. "I mean shielded. You didn't sign up for my life. Neither did Lennox. And I didn't want either of you dragged into it without choice. Well, we didn't get that choice today, did we?" Cullen stood. "I'll handle it." "How?" "By being loud, if I have to. I'll go public. I'll name you, claim him. Do it on my terms." Zariah stared at him. "You do that?" "I should have already." She stepped back, heart racing. This was never supposed to be a headline, Cullen. This was real. Quiet. Ours. He took a step closer. "It still is." She blinked quickly. "I don't know if I can do this." He reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. "I need time." His face fell, but he didn't argue. "I understand." Zariah swallowed hard. "I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need to breathe." He nodded, then quietly walked out. That night, Zariah sat in the dark with Lennox on her chest, rocking slowly as city lights danced through the blinds. Her heart wasn't broken. It was just scared, because loving a man like Cullen Easton didn't come with silence, and she didn't know yet if she was ready to live in the noise. 3 days passed. Zariah didn't see Cullen. He didn't text, didn't call, but she knew he was giving her space, and that somehow made it harder. Each night, after Lennox fell asleep, she stared at the bassinet longer than usual. She kept thinking about the flash of guilt in Cullen's eyes when he stepped out of her apartment. Not because he'd done something wrong, but because he didn't know how to make it right. By the 4th morning, her mother noticed. "You haven't smiled in days," she said gently, pouring tea. "I'm tired." "You've been tired since the day you gave birth." Zariah didn't respond. Her mother sat down at the kitchen table. "Whatever this is, you're allowed to want it, even if it scares you." Zariah stirred her tea without looking up. "What if wanting it brings chaos? Then you hold on tighter." That afternoon, Zariah found herself scrolling. Cullen had always been careful. Rare interviews, no social media, 0 personal posts. Until now. His company's official X page posted a press release. Zariah stared at the headline for a full minute before clicking. "Cullen Easton makes surprise announcement. I recently became a father. I've kept that part of my life private out of respect for the people involved. But my son is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I won't be answering personal questions, but I will say this. He changed me, and I intend to spend the rest of my life showing up for him. No names, no photos, no clickbait. Just truth, on his terms." Zariah read the last sentence over and over again. "I intend to spend the rest of my life showing up for him." She didn't know what to feel. Relief, gratitude, panic. What she felt, most of all, was a shift. He was no longer visiting her world. He was inviting her into his. That night, Cullen knocked again. Zariah didn't make him wait. He stepped in quietly, holding a small stuffed lion for Lennox, and a folded newspaper under his arm. Figured I'd better come see you before someone else tries to. She stared at him. You really did it. I meant what I said. Zariah crossed her arms. Why now? Because the more I stayed quiet, the more I looked like a man hiding his mistakes. But you and Lennox aren't mistakes. You're the reason I'm not just a man with money anymore. I'm a man with purpose. Her eyes searched his face. I didn't do it to win you back, he added. I did it because it was the right thing. Whether you want me in your life or not, I'll always show up for him. A long pause settled between them. Then Zariah said softly, and if I do want you in my life. Cullen stepped closer. I'll stay there. No headlines, no hiding, no conditions. She tilted her head. Even if it means learning to fold laundry and eat burnt pancakes? He smiled. Especially then. Later that night, after Lennox had been fed and bathed, Cullen offered to read him to sleep. Zariah handed him a board book. As he settled into the rocking chair with Lennox nestled in his arms, she leaned against the doorframe and watched. He read softly, voice calm and warm. Lennox blinked slowly, then dozed off mid-sentence. Cullen closed the book and looked up. Zariah hadn't moved. You're good at that, she said quietly. I had a good teacher. Who? You. She smiled then, slow, soft, full of something that had been missing for a long time. Cullen? Yeah? I'm scared. I know, but I don't want to be anymore. He stood, walked over, and placed a kiss on Lennox's head. Then he turned to her, leaned close, and whispered, Then let's stop being afraid together. That night, they sat on the couch with the baby monitor humming in the background. They didn't talk about what they were. They didn't need to. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up quietly, with folded hands, tired eyes, and a whispered promise. I'm still here. Have you ever tried to protect your peace, only to realize love was knocking quietly on the other side? Zariah didn't ask Cullen to choose her. She asked him to show up. And this time, he did, with actions, not promises. Tap like if you believe love should show up without needing to be begged. Drop a comment if you've ever been scared to trust again. Hit subscribe if you're here for stories that reflect what earned love truly looks like. Stay close. The heart of this story is just getting started. Monday morning started like most others now. Lennox fussed at 5:50 a.m. Cullen was the one who got up first, barefoot, groggy, voice low as he scooped baby from the crib. Zariah watched from bed, barely awake herself. Hey, little man, Cullen mumbled, pressing a soft kiss to Lennox's forehead. You couldn't give us 6 full hours. Lennox grunted, unconcerned. Cullen chuckled. Zariah turned over and smiled into her pillow. This was new. Not the crying, not the fatigue, but the US in it all. By 7, Cullen had changed Lennox, fed him a warmed bottle, and was bouncing, him gently in the rocker while reheating leftover tea on the stove. Zariah walked in with her headscarf still on and a hoodie thrown over her sleep shirt. Morning, she mumbled. Cullen glanced at her. You got 2 hours of sleep. You sure you're awake? I'm vertical. That counts. He handed her a mug. Sweetened. Just how you like it. She took a sip and narrowed her eyes. Did you add ginger? He nodded. Helps the nausea. You said you've been feeling off in the mornings again. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. By 8:30 a.m., Cullen was folding laundry at the kitchen table while Zariah bathed Lennox. He was terrible at folding onesies, but he tried. Later, he packed the diaper bag for the afternoon doctor's appointment, checked the route twice, and installed the spare stroller in the trunk. Zariah stood at the window for a minute, watching him buckle the straps. This wasn't performative. This wasn't charity. This was parenting. With her. Not just near her. And it made her chest tight in a way she wasn't used to. In the exam room, the pediatrician smiled after checking Lennox's vitals. He's growing fast. Great tone. Good reactions. Whatever you two are doing, it's working. Zariah smiled politely. Cullen spoke up. Can I ask about his feeding intervals? He seems more restless after 5 p.m. The doctor nodded and walked them through options. Zariah watched Cullen take notes on his phone. It wasn't the gesture that moved her. It was the intent. The way he didn't assume, didn't dominate. Just asked and listened. As they left the clinic, she whispered, "You'd make a good father." He looked at her with surprise. "I'm trying." "You're doing." At home that evening, Cullen offered to cook dinner. Zariah lifted a brow. "After last time? I've leveled up." Watched a video. She crossed her arms. "Please tell me it wasn't a 30-second reel." He grinned. "It was 2 minutes. The pasta came out undercooked. The chicken was perfect." Zariah ate every bite without complaining. Lennox sat in his high chair, smearing puree across his tray, giggling with messy hands. Cullen wiped him down with surprising skill. Zariah watched, chewing slowly, her heart unsettled. This was working, more than she thought it would. And yet, that scared her. Because she didn't know where Cullen drew the line between commitment and comfort. Was he still testing the waters? Or had he already jumped in, silently? Later that night, as she stood brushing her teeth, Cullen leaned against the bathroom doorway. "Can I ask you something?" She glanced over, toothbrush still in her mouth. "What happens next?" He said. She froze. Spat, rinsed. "What do you mean?" "This. Us. You and me. Lennox. The calendar's filling up. My schedule's been rearranged. We're building something, but we haven't named it." Zariah leaned on the counter. "I don't know how to name it yet." "That's fair. But I know how it feels." He stepped closer. "And safe. Consistent. A little scary." He nodded. "Same." A beat passed. "You don't have to rush," he added. "I'm not asking for answers. I just want to know if we're writing the same story, even if we're on different pages." Zariah met his eyes. "We are," she said softly, "but I'm still using pencil." Cullen smiled at that. "I'll wait for ink." That night, they fell asleep with Lennox between them on the bed. A small body. A growing bond. 3 steady heartbeats in the dark. The knock came just after noon. Zariah was wearing leggings and a tank, hair in a twisted bun, Lennox on her hip. Cullen was in the kitchen fixing a bottle. It was a regular day, until it wasn't. She opened the door and froze. 2 women stood there, both holding iPads, lanyards around their necks. "Miss Blair, I'm Eliza with City Light Media, and this is Ray from the Times Global. We're reaching out for a pre-cleared feature on Mr. Easton's statement last week. We understand you've asked for privacy, but we're happy to walk if you'd like to share your version of events." Zariah blinked. Once. Twice. Behind her, Cullen stepped into view. "Leave," he said sharply. Eliza lifted her hands. "We're not here to harass. We're here for clarity. You're on private property. Public interest is growing, Mr. Easton. You went from total silence to a full announcement. That changes the rules." Zariah stepped in front of Cullen. "I'm not a statement, and this isn't a quote." Then she shut the door. Firm, Cullen paced the living room for the next 10 minutes. Zariah stayed quiet, bouncing Lennox gently in her arms. "They found your name," he said. "That means they'll dig further. Photos, background, family." Zariah stiffened. "My mother." "I'll handle it." "How?" "I'll get a team to block coverage, redirect exposure, shut down false narratives." She turned sharply. "You'll handle it? Like you're handling me?" Cullen froze. "That's not what I meant," he said, voice calm. Zariah laid Lennox down in his bassinet, then faced Cullen fully. "This is why I hesitated, why I told you I didn't want noise. I've worked my whole life to build peace out of scraps. And now, my name is about to be twisted into something I don't control." Cullen looked down. "I never wanted to hurt you, but you also didn't prepare me. You protected me in silence instead of involving me. That's not partnership, Cullen. That's control with a smile." He winced. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. But her voice was sharper than it had been in weeks. "I need space." He nodded. I'll go. Zariah stepped aside. He walked to the door, hand on the knob, then stopped. Zariah. She looked up. I never wanted to be the man who wrecked your peace. I only ever wanted to be the man who helped hold it up. Then he walked out. That night, her mother knocked gently on her bedroom door. You okay? Zariah nodded. You sure? No. Her mother stepped inside, sat on the edge of the bed. I've been watching you, she said softly. You and Cullen. I see how he carries the diaper bag, how he talks to the baby like he's listening, how he looks at you like he's not afraid of the hard parts. Zariah stayed quiet. I'm not telling you to forgive noise, baby. I'm telling you not to confuse discomfort with danger. Zariah turned. What if I'm not built for his world? Her mother smiled. Maybe he's not built for his world anymore either. The next day, the press stories kept spinning, but the headlines were slower now, less personal. Cullen's legal team was working behind the scenes. She hadn't responded to a single request, and wouldn't, but she missed him. The silence this time didn't feel peaceful. It felt unfinished. That Friday, she went to the park with Lennox. The weather was crisp, the breeze clean. As she spread out a blanket under the same old tree Cullen had first shown her, she noticed something beside the bench. A small box, taped closed, her name written on top. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single photo, taken at the bookstore weeks ago. Cullen holding Lennox, both unaware of the camera. Underneath it was a note. If they want a headline, let it be this: a man trying to be better, a woman who changed him, and a baby who gave him purpose. You're not a secret, Zariah. You're my beginning. She sat back on the grass, Lennox asleep on her chest, tears rising and falling without a sound. No spotlight, no noise, just truth. And now, it was her turn to decide what came next. Sunday came without fanfare. The city moved as it always did. Horns, footsteps, a rhythm that didn't slow down for anyone. Zariah stood in her kitchen, Lennox bouncing quietly in his seat near the fridge. She stirred oatmeal absent-mindedly, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The box from the park sat unopened on the dining table now, the note folded carefully inside. She hadn't called Cullen, hadn't texted either. She was still sorting through her thoughts, not in panic, not in fear, but in clarity, because sometimes forgiveness didn't come with a bang. Sometimes it came with breakfast and baby wipes, and one woman deciding that love wasn't a weakness if it was chosen, not survived. She picked up her phone and opened a message. Zariah, are you free to come by today? No expectations. It was short, honest. The read receipt appeared almost instantly. A typing bubble. Then it disappeared. Then it returned. Cullen, I'm already on my way. He arrived just before noon. No flowers, no explanations rehearsed. Just Cullen, jacket zipped, hair damp from the chill outside, a quiet look in his eyes. Zariah opened the door and stepped back. Hey, she said. Hey. She let him in. Lennox squealed as soon as he saw Cullen and reached for him immediately. Cullen smiled and bent low to scoop him up. Missed you too, little man. Zariah crossed her arms, watching. They stood in silence for a moment, just the three of them, before she finally spoke. I don't want a public life. I know. I want to be seen, but on my terms. I want that for you too. She nodded. I also don't want to keep rebuilding something if the foundation is still weak. Cullen stepped closer, rocking Lennox gently. Then let's tear it down and pour a better one. She blinked. No defense. No excuses, just that, and it made something inside her loosen. Over the next hour, they talked, not like people trying to fix things, but like people ready to understand each other. Zariah told him her boundaries. Cullen respected them. Cullen asked about next steps. Zariah told him they'd go slow. She didn't want to move in together, didn't want a title yet, didn't need labels to feel whole, but she did want more shared nights. More co-parenting, more trust. She wanted to see if this real, slow, quiet love could grow without needing an audience. Cullen agreed, without a fight, without hesitation, because the only thing he wanted more than her love was her peace. That evening, they fed Lennox dinner together, bathed him, dressed him in soft yellow pajamas. Then Zariah surprised herself. She turned to Cullen after the baby fell asleep and asked, "Do you want to stay?" He looked at her carefully. "You sure?" "I am." So he did. They didn't kiss that night, didn't rush anything. They just lay side by side, listening to the baby monitor and letting the quiet settle around them like a soft blanket. Cullen reached for her hand. Zariah let him hold it. And that was enough. Because for the first time, it wasn't about falling fast or proving something. It was about building something, slow, grounded and true. A week later, Cullen made a quiet ask. "Come to dinner. No photographers, no suits. Just my sister's house. She asked to meet you. On her own." Zariah stared at him across the table, spoon in her hand halfway to Lennox's mouth. He didn't rush her, didn't push. She set the spoon down. What does she know? Only what matters. That I have a son. That I'm trying not to mess up again. That you're important. Zariah wiped Lennox's chin and met his eyes. "I'll come, but I'm not performing." Cullen leaned in. "You never have to." Saturday came quietly. Zariah wore a soft sweater, dark jeans, and tied her hair back. Nothing dramatic. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here because Cullen hadn't asked her to be anyone but herself. The house was tucked away in an old neighborhood outside of the city, leafy, quiet, lived in. Cullen opened the door before she even knocked. "You sure about this?" he whispered. "I am now." He took her hand, no cameras, no one watching, and guided her inside. A woman in her early 40s stepped out of the kitchen, apron tied, curls pinned up, warmth in her eyes. "You must be Zariah." Zariah nodded slowly. "Yes, and this is Lennox." The woman walked over, gentle and slow. "I'm Sloane. I've been waiting to meet both of you." She didn't ask to hold the baby. Didn't throw questions. She just offered a smile and led them into a living room filled with the scent of garlic and love. Zariah took a breath. This wasn't a setup. This was family. Dinner was simple. Baked chicken, mashed potatoes, roasted carrots, warm bread. Zariah fed Lennox pieces of soft vegetable while Sloane told stories about Cullen as a kid. He groaned. "Do we need to go over the lemonade stand story again?" Sloane laughed. "You charged $8 per cup, Cullen." Zariah smiled as she watched Cullen melt into his past. Not the polished CEO version, but the boy who got caught stealing cookies and fell off the porch trying to impress a neighbor girl. It was disarming, endearing, real. After dinner, Sloane took Lennox into the den to show him a basket of old toys. Cullen leaned toward Zariah. "I've never brought anyone here before." Zariah glanced at him. "You don't say that like it's a line." "It's not. It's an apology for not knowing how to do this right before." She didn't speak for a moment. Then, "I think I needed to see this side of you. Not the office, not the condo, just here." He nodded. "Thank you for letting me show you." Later, Sloane returned with Lennox, now snuggled in her arms, eyes heavy with sleep. Zariah stood and reached for her son, brushing a kiss against his curls. Sloane smiled. "He's safe here. You're safe here." It wasn't just a statement. It was a permission. On the drive home, Cullen didn't turn on music. The silence was full, not awkward. At a red light, he looked over. "You don't owe me anything, Zariah. But if I ever earn a second chance with you, just know I won't waste it." She watched him. Steady, clear, no grand promises, just truth. Zariah looked ahead. "Then keep showing up like this." They pulled up to her apartment. He didn't ask to come in, but she turned before stepping out. "Next time, you can stay for breakfast." He exhaled, like that small line had meant everything. "Next time," he repeated. She closed the door gently behind her. And upstairs, as she laid Lennox down, Zariah smiled for the first time in a long time, without bracing for disappointment. Because this time, no one was rushing. And this time, she was choosing what her future would look like. The text came in at 6:48 a.m. Cullen sat at the edge of his bed, freshly showered, towel around his waist, phone in hand. From his publicist, "Need your eyes on this. Page 6 just ran it." He clicked the link. At the top of the gossip column was a photo. Zariah, holding Lennox, walking beside Cullen in a quiet neighborhood. No makeup, no filter, no warning. Caption: Billionaire Cullen J. Ross spotted with mystery woman and toddler. Secret family. He blinked, then stood, then called her. "Zariah, it's out." Her voice on the other end wasn't panicked, just tired. "How bad?" "Bad enough to trend," she sighed. "Come over." 10 minutes later, he was at her door. She didn't answer right away. When she did, she had Lennox in her arms, already dressed and alert. "I didn't know they followed us that night," she said softly, stepping aside. "They didn't. Someone tipped them." Her eyes narrowed. "You think it was Sloane?" He shook his head instantly. No, she'd never. But someone saw us. Maybe a neighbor. Zariah moved to the table where her laptop was open. The photo was already there. "That's my son. I know. That's me. I know. And that's not the world I wanted to raise him in." He stepped forward slowly. "We can fix it." She turned. Can you make them unsee it? Can you erase the comments saying I'm a gold digger, a plant, that Lennox isn't yours?" His jaw tightened. "No. But I can make sure they know you're not alone in this." Zariah didn't speak for a while. She looked at Lennox, then at Cullen, then back at the screen. "I didn't sign up for this. I know. And I'm sorry. But I won't hide either." That surprised him. "I thought you'd want to lay low." She glanced at him, firm. "No, because hiding looks like shame. And I'm not ashamed of my life, or my son, or the night that brought him here." He didn't speak, didn't breathe for a moment. Then he walked to her, slowly, deliberately, took her hand. "I'll call a press conference." She blinked. "That's not what I meant." "I know, but I want to. I'm not going to let them twist this." Zariah shook her head gently. "No press conferences, not yet. Let them talk." Cullen searched her face. "You sure?" She nodded. "I'm not going to fuel it. Let your silence say more than your statement ever could." He admired that about her, the way she knew when to speak, and when silence cut deeper. He took Lennox from her arms and walked him over to the window. "You're brave," he said without turning around. Zariah folded her arms. "No, I'm just done letting fear shape my life." She meant it, and Cullen saw it. He'd spent years crafting a public image. She'd spent years building a private reality. And now the two had collided. He turned back. "I want to be part of that reality." Zariah's voice softened. "Then show up for it. Not with press statements or strategy, but with presence." He smiled slightly. "I can do that." That morning they stayed in. No scrolling, no reacting, no panic. Cullen ordered breakfast. Zariah fed Lennox quietly. They existed like a family the world couldn't reach, and for the first time since the story broke, peace returned to the room. Later that afternoon, Cullen stood by the window, phone in hand. "I'll handle the board. There's going to be noise." Zariah nodded from the couch, her head resting back. "And me? You owe no one a word. But if you ever want to speak on your terms, I'll make sure they listen." She nodded slowly. But her mind wasn't on headlines anymore. It was on something else. The man standing in her space without trying to own it. The son who now looked to him with comfort. The silence that for once wasn't scary. It was something else. It was home. Cullen turned toward her. "Can I take you both somewhere tomorrow?" "Where?" "Where no one can find us." Zariah raised an eyebrow. "I mean it. Just for a day. Just us. No cars, no cameras." She paused, then gave the faintest nod. "Okay." He smiled, because it wasn't just a yes to a trip. It was a yes to him, to this new rhythm they were building, one beat at a time. By 8 a.m. the next morning, they were already on the road, not in Cullen's usual convoy. No tinted SUV, no assistants in tow. Just a rented crossover, a single car seat in the back, and a duffel bag with snacks, wipes, and one worn-out plush lion named Rocket. Zariah watched Cullen drive. Plain t-shirt, black baseball cap, no watch, no tension in his shoulders. "Where are we going?" she asked again. "Somewhere without service." She smiled, curious but calm. They'd been on the road for an hour when they pulled off into a long gravel path surrounded by trees. Ahead, a modest cabin sat beside a wide lake. Zariah blinked. "This yours?" "No. It belonged to my aunt. I used to come here every summer when I was a kid. After she passed, she left it to me. I haven't been back in years." He parked, turned the engine off, turned to her. "I wanted you to see where I felt the most normal." Zariah opened the door and stepped out into the stillness. The wind smelled like pine. The lake mirrored the sky like it hadn't been touched in weeks. Cullen walked around to get Lennox from his car seat. The little boy blinked at the sunlight and reached instinctively for Cullen's neck. "Welcome to our hideaway," Cullen said, bouncing him gently. Zariah walked up the steps of the wooden porch, touched the railing. It didn't feel like money. It felt like memory. Inside, the cabin was simple. No glass decor, no designer furniture. Just old wood, quiet corners, and shelves of books older than Cullen. He handed Lennox a small stuffed moose from the mantel. "He's named Bruce Rocket's new friend." Zariah smiled. "You planned that? I want him to feel like this is his too." That touched her, more than she admitted. They spent the morning out by the lake. Cullen let Lennox sit between his knees and toss pebbles into the water. Zariah sat on a fold-out chair, watching them, her hair tied up, legs stretched out, eyes relaxed in a way they hadn't been in years. "Did you always know you wanted kids?" she asked. He looked up at her. "No. I always thought I'd be terrible at it." "You're not, you sure?" She nodded. "I know what terrible looks like. You're not even close." Cullen looked down at Lennox, who was now babbling to a squirrel near the edge of the dock. "I don't want to just be not terrible, Zariah. I want to be what he needs. You're already becoming that." They fell into a quiet rhythm. Lunch was sandwiches. Lennox napped on the couch with Bruce. Zariah sat cross-legged on the rug, flipping through one of Cullen's childhood books. He returned from the back room with a blanket and draped it around her shoulders without saying a word. She looked up. "You remember how to be gentle." He met her eyes. "Only because you didn't punish me when I forgot." She didn't reply, but she reached up and touched his hand, and he let her. Later that afternoon they walked the trail behind the cabin, Lennox in a carrier. On Cullen's back, his little hands tugging at leaves and strands of Cullen's hair. "Your board will be pissed you're offline this long," Zariah teased. "They can manage. They didn't build the company for me. I did that. So what are you building now?" He stopped walking, turned to her. "A life." The words landed softly, but they stayed. They returned to the cabin before sunset. Zariah lit candles. Cullen cooked something passable. Lennox clapped for both of them, like a tiny judge from a Food Network show. When they finally sat on the porch, the stars were out. Cullen leaned back in the rocking chair. Zariah curled her legs beside him on the second seat, Lennox asleep in her arms. "You think it'll always be this easy?" she asked quietly. "No. But I think you and we could get through the parts that aren't." She looked over at him. "What makes you so sure?" "Because you don't need me, but you still let me stay." Silence stretched between them. Not tense, not uncertain, just full. "I loved you," Zariah whispered. He didn't move. "I know. I still do." Cullen turned his head, met her gaze. "I never stopped." He leaned forward slowly. So did she, but she paused, inches away from his lips. "We should go slow." His eyes didn't flicker. "Then let's walk," he said softly. She smiled, because it wasn't about rushing. It was about choosing. And tonight, under the stars, with the world quiet and their child between them, they chose each other, without shame, without cameras, without permission, only intention. 3 days later, Cullen's Range Rover turned back onto city streets. Traffic, billboards, the constant buzz of people with too much to say and not enough time to think. Zariah leaned her head against the passenger window, eyes tracking buildings like they didn't quite belong to her anymore. Lennox, asleep in the back seat, clutching Bruce and Rocket. Cullen glanced at her. Regretting the return, she gave a faint smile. Only everything but the baby wipes and running water. He chuckled. Those cabin showers are humbling. Zariah turned toward him, eyes clearer now. Thank you. For that time. For choosing it. He reached across the console and gently squeezed her hand. I'm choosing you, Zariah. Not as a favor. Not for the press. You. All the way. She nodded, quietly absorbing that truth. Back at her apartment, things were different. Not rearranged. Just noticed. Zariah saw the cracked tile near the entryway and thought, Lennox will trip over that one day. She opened the fridge and imagined Cullen bending awkwardly under the short shelves. The place suddenly felt small, not in size, but in possibility. Still, she unpacked slowly. Cullen stayed long enough to help get Lennox settled. He didn't push. He didn't ask for more than she could give. He just stood at the door when it was time to leave, looking like a man who would wait as long as it took. I'm not going anywhere, he said. I know. She meant it. Over the next 2 weeks, the outside world caught up. One photo, that's all it took. A distant paparazzi shot of Cullen and Zariah at a farmer's market with Lennox in a carrier across Cullen's chest. His hand in hers, smiles, nothing posed, everything real. By sunset, Zariah's name was trending. Again, but this time, not as a secret, not as a rumor, as a reality. Cullen Dane, billionaire tech CEO, with the woman the press once called a mystery mistake, and their child. They called it the redemption arc. She hated it. Because none of them knew what had been lost, or what was still being rebuilt. She avoided interviews, declined PR pushes, but the headlines didn't stop. Dane Dynasty Reborn, the woman who changed him billionaire's love child, and the mother who tamed the giant. She deleted every alert. Except one, an invitation. From the Harlem Women's Wellness Collective. They wanted her to speak about resilience, about motherhood, about identity. Zariah read it 3 times. Then she said yes. The event was held in a community center with folding chairs and dollar store tablecloths. But the air inside buzzed with warmth, not money. Zariah stepped up to the podium in a simple white dress, her curls pulled back, her voice steady. I'm not here because I married into wealth, she began. I'm here because I refuse to let a mistake define me. The room listened. I was a wellness therapist without a home, a woman with a newborn, and no clue how to be everything to someone who needed me to be steady. She paused, locking eyes with a mother in the second row, holding a toddler with Down syndrome. I didn't know what love looked like in a real way until I had to give it without getting anything back. Applause, not thunderous, but real. After the speech, she stayed, took questions, listened to stories, let women hug her and cry against her shoulder like they'd known her longer than 10 minutes. Cullen was waiting outside when she walked out. No cameras, just him. How'd it go? He asked, holding out a water bottle. I didn't cry, he smiled. Then, I'm proud. You would have liked it. I like you more. They stood there for a beat. Come over? She asked. His eyes softened. Always. That night, after Lennox went down, they sat on the couch with nothing but the TV on mute. Zariah rested her head on Cullen's chest. You still haven't told you're bored, she said. I will. When? When I stop caring what they think more than what I want. She shifted to face him. And what do you want? He cupped her cheek, slow, reverent. You. Every version. She kissed him. Soft, sure. Not because she had to, because she trusted the moment. And him. It didn't lead to more that night. It didn't have to. But it led to something else. a beginning. The next morning, a small package arrived on her doorstep. Inside was a handwritten note. Zariah, for the life we're building, one piece at a time. See. And underneath it, a house key. Not flashy, not diamond-studded, just a key to his world, to her next step. Zariah held it in her palm for a long time, because it didn't just open a door, it asked a question. Zariah didn't rush to use the key. It stayed on her dresser for days, a quiet symbol of something that no longer needed urgency, only honesty. In those days, she watched Lennox laugh louder. She watched herself pause longer, breathe deeper. She watched Cullen, showing up without being asked, picking up groceries, folding laundry, making pancakes and burning half. One night, she found him asleep on the couch with Lennox curled on his chest, both mouths parted the same way. It was then she knew. It wasn't about the key. It was about the door she no longer wanted to close. That Sunday morning, Zariah didn't tell him. She simply packed a weekend bag, buckled Lennox into the car, and drove to Cullen's penthouse. When he opened the door and saw them both, suitcase in hand, his expression didn't change. He stepped aside without words, because he already understood. This time, she walked in not as a guest, not as a secret, but as someone who belonged. Cullen didn't throw a party. He didn't post a photo. He just made coffee and said, "There's fresh towels in the guest room. Unless..." She smiled. "I'll take your room." They both laughed. Later that night, after Lennox fell asleep, they stood on the rooftop overlooking Manhattan's skyline. Cullen slid his arms around her from behind. His chin rested gently on her shoulder. "I want to ask something," he said quietly. Zariah leaned into him. "What?" He turned her to face him, eyes steady. No pressure, no clock, no ring. "But would you consider building something real here? With me, not tomorrow, but with time?" Zariah didn't answer with a yes. She answered with her forehead pressed to his, with a long breath, and the kind of kiss that tasted like peace. That was enough. Over the weeks, she began to shift things. One drawer, then two, then half a closet. She didn't post about it. She just lived it. She and Cullen found rhythm in the real. Morning routines with toddler screams, late-night snacks in oversized t-shirts, arguments over thermostat settings. Inside jokes no one else understood. There was no announcement, no press release, only presence. And that became the loudest kind of love. One afternoon, while Lennox napped, Cullen brought out a small leather notebook. "What's this?" she asked, sliding onto the couch. "A timeline." Zariah blinked. "Of what?" "Our moments, the real ones. I've been writing them down. I didn't want us to forget the quiet things." She flipped through it, the way her eyes softened when she said his name the second time. The first night she let him feed Lennox. The moment she gave him a key to her apartment, without a word. Zariah swallowed. "This is beautiful." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm not great with words when I speak, but when I write, I remember better." She kissed the corner of his mouth. "You remember perfectly." By spring, they were sharing the space fully. It wasn't flashy, but it was full. One night, Cullen took Zariah's hand in bed and whispered, "You changed the temperature of my life." She smiled. "You learned to sit in the warmth." Their rhythm wasn't perfect. They had moments of frustration, missteps in parenting, gaps in understanding, but they had respect. They had space to grow. They had something worth returning to, even after the hard days. And then came her birthday. Zariah never liked big celebrations, but this time, Cullen handed her a small box wrapped in navy velvet. Inside, a locket. Gold. Simple. No diamonds. No flash. Inside it, 2 photos. One of Lennox smiling on the swings. One of her, not posed. Just her sitting on the balcony with sunlight in her hair. He looked nervous. "It's not a proposal. It's a promise. You and him are everything. You center me." Zariah touched the locket, her heart full. "I've never been someone's center," she said softly. "You've always been someone's home," he replied. "You were just too busy surviving to notice." She wore the locket every day after that, not because it proved anything, but because it reminded her she didn't need to fight for her worth anymore. She lived it. Months passed. Lennox turned 3. Cullen let him frost his own cake. They got more on the counter than the cake, but Zariah didn't care. Lennox laughed until he fell backward on the floor. Cullen followed him down, pretending to faint. Zariah snapped a photo. Later that night, she looked at it alone on the couch. Her boys, the love she thought she had to hide, the peace she thought she'd never feel. Cullen came and sat beside her. "You good?" he asked. She nodded, emotion caught in her throat. "You ever wonder," she began, "what would have happened if I never sent that email? Never told you?" He kissed her forehead. "Then I would have stayed empty, and our son would have grown up never knowing he was born from something real." Zariah leaned into him. "I'm not scared anymore," she whispered. "Neither am I," he said. They sat there. No music, no agenda. Just two people who took the long road back to themselves and each other. Zariah smiled as Lennox's tiny footsteps padded down the hallway. He was supposed to be asleep, but life rarely followed the rules. "Mummy," he whispered. She pulled him close, resting him between them. And in that moment, with the city outside and the quiet love inside, Zariah knew one thing for sure. She hadn't just found the billionaire. She had found herself, and that would always be the truest heir of all. Before you go, let's ask one thing. If you had a second shot at love, would you take it or protect your peace? Zariah wasn't looking for a reunion. She wanted healing. But sometimes, healing walks in wearing the same face that once broke you. If this story made you feel something, even once, subscribe, tap like, drop a comment. Tell us your favorite part of this journey, because on this channel, we don't just tell stories. We remind you that even after pain, there is grace. And even after silence, love can still speak. We'll see you in the next one.